page 48 in the book, and he's talking about the Rukū, and he says, then one makes Rukū from the waist. The best way is to raise one's hand and say Allahu Akbar, so that the person begins raising the hands as he starts the takbir. And when the hands are at shoulder level, he bows. And it's mustahab to prolong the words of the takbir until one reaches the posture of Rukū. All right, Jay. Now he's talking about from coming from the standing position and going into Rukū. He says one makes Rukū from the waist. You bow down at the waist. You bow down at the waist. Your waist is where you bend from, not your knees and all the rest of that stuff. Your waist is where you bend, where you make the bend at. He says, and the best way is to raise one's hand saying Allahu Akbar, so that the person begins raising the hands when he starts the takbir. All right. Whether, you have two ways of looking at this. And this is why people do different things when they come up out of the Rukū. All right. You'll see that some people, after they recite the Fatiha and they recite the other surah, they'll put their hands down and then they'll make the takbir. I know you're pretty sure y'all seen that before. And then they'll make the takbir and they'll go down in the Rukū. Other people, they'll make their takbir from here. They'll just say Allahu Akbar. The point is, regardless of which decision, which one you go with, is that he says, as you start the raising of the hands, you start the takbir, whether it's from here or whether it's from here. Allahu Akbar, but you don't finish the takbir until you're down into the Rukū. So he says, this is when he says, and one says Allahu Akbar, so that the person begins raising the hands as he starts the takbir. He says, and when the hands are at shoulder level, this is when they start to bow. So what he's trying to explain here is that situation of, how when you see some people, or you may even do it, when they make the takbir, they kind of, they're already moving down when they make the takbir. Kind of like they're going down, they're meeting their hands as they're going down. But what he's saying is that you make the takbir, and once your hands come up, that's when you go down into the Rukū. And he says that it's mustahab, or it's recommended, to prolong the words of the takbir until one reaches the posture of Rukū, until you've reached down and gotten into the what's another word for posture? The position of the Rukū. So your Allahu Akbar starts with the raising of the hands, and it ends when you're in Rukū. And he says, then one makes i'tidal. I'tidal, he says that this is the straightening up, the standing up. This is the i'tidal, is the standing up. He says the best way is to raising the hands, lifting them from the knees, and one starts straightening up. As one starts straightening up, raising them to the shoulder level and the head together, saying Sami Allahu liman hamida. And when one is standing upright, they say Rabbana lakal hamd. So, excuse me, I apologize about that. He says one makes it i'tidal. Now he's talking about the standing position after the Rukū. He said the best way is the raising of the hands, is to raise the hands, lifting them up from the knees as one starts straightening up. So as you're coming up, your hands start coming up. Raising them to the shoulder level. So they come back up to the shoulder level, right? This is after you come out of the Rukū. And as you're coming up, you say Sami Allahu liman hamida. And he says once your hands are back up here, This is when you say, Rabbana lakal hamd, once your hands have reached up top. All right, he says, and then one makes sajda, prostrates. Again, he says it here again, and make sure that you should do it in all three of these sections. The section for the Rukū, at the end of the first line, he says the best way. The i'tidal, the end of the first line, he says the best way. And here on sajda, at the end of the first line, he says the best way again. So you understand that he's not saying the only way to do it, but the best way. He says Allahu Akbar, and to put the knees down first, and then the hands, and then the forehead and nose. He says the best way is to do it that way. But some people, they can't do it that way. So they have to go down on their hands first. To eliminate the whole of that argument, all right, do we do the hands first? Do we do the knees first? And is it going down like a camel or not going down? Listen, the argument can be gotten into later. But what we need to understand is what he's trying to do here now is explain to us what is it, how do we do it according to the madhab. So he says the best way is to go down with the knees first, and then the hands, and then the face or the nose and the forehead. Because you know it's not just your forehead. It's supposed to touch the ground. It's your forehead and your nose together. All right. Um, he says keeping the hands directly under one's shoulders with the fingers together and extended towards the direction of the Qibla. So when you go down, like let's say the Qibla was over my head. Right now I'm in sujood. Like this is the floor right here. My hands should be up under my shoulders like this. Right? And my fingers are together. And when he says extended towards the Qibla is this way. So we're pretending that right now I'm on the floor making sajda. Right? My hands are under my shoulders levels right here. And my fingers are closed and they're pointed up towards the Qibla. He says, and then he sends the hand forward. All right. He says, and it's to put the knees down and the hands and the forehead to the nose, keeping the hands directly under one's shoulder, as we said, with the fingers together, extended towards the direction of the Qibla, and the hands are uncovered. And the hands are uncovered. All right. He says, for men to maintain one span gap between the two knees and the 2 feet, while the women keep them together. So, for men, what they're supposed to do is, you know, those pictures that you see on the internet where they show you about people praying and you see them from the back when they're making the rukū and they say, you know, you have to keep your feet together like this. Right? According to the madhab, the men, when we go down to make sajda, we don't keep our legs shut. Our legs are open a little bit. Right? When our knees hit the ground, they're not together. We don't put our knees down on the ground like this. Our knees are separate. And our feet are separate. Our feet aren't smacked together like that either. They're not up like this. Right? When we go down, our feet are the same, pretty much the same distance as our knees apart. Right? This is what he's trying to explain to you. This is the opinion of the madhab. He says, so he says for men to maintain one span gap, basically like a handstand. They shouldn't be really far apart, is what he's saying. But they also don't need to be right together. There's supposed to be a little bit of space between the two knees and the 2 feet. There should be pretty much the same amount of space in between, so it goes straight back. Your legs are going straight back. Uh-huh. Uh, but he says as far as the women, they should keep their legs closed and their feet closed. So the way in which you see the feet from the back and those posters that they have up, that's the way that the women's feet should be shut like that. But their legs also should be shut. Right? And again, he's talking here about the best way, not the only way. Keep that in mind. So when you see someone doing something other than that, see, a lot of times we get into the habit, we want to correct everyone. And we don't realize that this creates a bad feeling. People get a bad feeling when someone's always trying to correct them. So when people are doing things that are seemingly correct and they're not just wrong, then we leave them where they're at unless they ask for advice or we know we're in a position to be able to advise them to do better. Like you may be someone's teacher, you may be someone's advisor, things along these sorts. But we don't just go to them and say, you know what? You could pray, you could be praying better. Because we know we don't want anybody telling them. I mean, we say we don't mind it because it makes us feel good. But no one wants to be praying and then someone comes to you and say, well, listen, you could be doing better in your Salah. It's like, you know. So unless it's like a teachable situation, we leave people alone. Unless they're doing something that is just wrong, then we tell them, listen, not this is more suitable, but this is the way to go about doing it. Um, he says for men to keep the stomach away from the thighs and the forearms from the sides, while women keep them together. So again, the point behind all of this part is that men in the salah they're spread out a little bit more, and women are together. So, like we said, with the men with the legs and the feet, there's a space in between there. For the women, there shouldn't be. Okay? When we talk about when you go down and you're making the sajda, you're gonna find that men should be more like this, where women will be a little bit more compact, where their stomach will go onto their thighs. Whereas from the sunnah for men to spread out a little bit more. So you're supposed to try to keep your stomach off of your thighs as men. Women are just the opposite. As well as you'll see, and it's strange because you'll even see when people come here, like even when you go to Saudi, when you go wherever you're gonna go, you'll see that the things that we push aren't pushed in most Muslim countries. You know, one of the things like how when you see people talk about praying, you keep the space open under your arms, or for men. They're taught that, when they pray, they keep their hands out. I mean, their arms out like this when they're in the sajda. All right. So you'll find brothers will do that, and they do it when they come here. This is a lot of times when you see people doing certain things, you be like, "Yo, he's one of the fresh off the boaters." Meaning they're new here, but they keep their arms out, like even when they're in a jama'ah salah, and it's like you can't really do that when you're praying with a bunch of people. When you got somebody to the right of you and the left of you, but you'll find brothers that'll do it anyway. Or the thing that when the brothers do, stand shoulder to shoulder, foot to foot, it was a big thing back there. So you'll see brothers that are new here, they'll do it. But it's like somebody will have their foot here and they'll put their foot up against theirs and they'll move it and they'll just move it, keep moving their foot over, keep moving their foot over like those are the types of things that, when we see brothers doing that, we'd be like, those are fresh off the boat. It's not to laugh at them, but it's like most places they don't, that's not like something that, or, you'll find brothers that'll grab you and kind of like pull you over or put their arm behind you and kind of move you over in the Salah while you're praying. Those types of things. Those aren't really things that you see people, really focusing on um, here like they do there. MashaAllah. So he says that for men to keep the stomach and the stomach away from the thighs and the forearms from the side. I mean, even in the Jama'ah Salah, you do it a little bit, but all of this, no. All of that, no. He says, while the women keep them together, meaning keep the stomach on the thighs, and she kind of bunches up a little bit, so her arms aren't away from her sides. All right. He says while women keep them together, he says to recite the tasbih 3 times. So he says it's commendable to supplicate before Allah while prostrating. The tasbih that he's talking about here is the tasbih. I just now saw your message. Um, okay, I just saw your messages. Let me just finish the sentence and I'll respond. But go ahead, finish typing what you're typing now. Um, I don't know why, but this the Discord, usually when people leave messages, my phone makes a sound and my computer makes a sound, but maybe it's just the notifications. I got to turn them on or something. I don't know because it's not letting me know when one of y'all are leaving a message. But the tasbih that he's talking about here, you can mark it down here. He said the tasbih, he's talking about that statement, Subhana Rabbi al-A'la. Subhana Rabbi al-A'la, Subhana Rabbi al-A'la. He says you say this 3 times. He says it's commendable to supplicate before Allah while prostrated, or it should say it's commendable to supplicate to Allah or to ask Allah to make dua to Allah for what it is that you're looking for while you're prostrating. This is one of the best positions or places for a slave to be when asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for something, is while he's in sujood. Then he says, then one raises the head and sits before prostrating a second time. Now he's talking about the sitting. Here, this next section, he's talking about the sitting between the 2 prostrations, raising the head and sits before prostrating a second time. And again, here he says, in the last line, he says, the best way is. So he says, the best way is to say Allahu Akbar as one raises the head to sit in iftirash. So he says that as they're coming up and they come back up into the sitting position between the 2 prostrations, or the 2 sajdas, he said you come up and sit in a sitting position called iftirash. You should circle that. And this is to place the which is to place the left foot on its side and to sit on it while keeping the right foot on the bottom of its toes, heel up. So your left foot is like this, and you're sitting on your left foot, the same position that we've always seen, that people have always talked about. And their right foot is up with their toes on the ground. Tight. And the heel is up top. The toes are down here. He says, and extended. He said, with the fingers extended and held together to recite the dua, رب اغفر لي وارحمني واجبرني وارفعني ورفاني. Sorry about that. He says, وارزقني واهديني وعافيني واعف عني. He says that once the individual comes back up into the sitting position, right, he says to place both hands on the thighs near the knees. Now, he doesn't say on the knees. He says near the knees, right behind the knees. He said with the fingers held together and they make the dua, Rabbi gfirli, warhamni, wajburni, warfa'ni, warzuqni, wahdini, wa'afini, wa'fu anni. This is a dua that's said when you're in the sitting position between the two sajdas. And that dua, making that dua is mustahab. It is recommended. So it's not obligatory. And he says, okay, so he says as far as the prostration, the second prostration, you go back down and do what you did. And after you come up, after you finish this one, he says, and after this one, raises the head saying, Allahu Akbar, as the person is coming up. Then they follow through with this until they're standing, and they prolong the Allahu Akbar from the time that they're getting up, Allahu Akbar, and they finish it when they've stood up. So it's not, and I'm not saying you can't do it because there's nothing wrong if you do it, other than the fact that the best way to do it is this way. But if a person, whereas as they got up, they say Allahu Akbar, and then they stood up. Or if a person starts to stand up and as they stand up, they say Allahu Akbar. All of this is this takbirah here is a non-obligatory act to begin with. So it counts. But the best way to do it is to start your Allahu Akbar as you're coming out of the Rukū and keep it going until you stood back up for the second rak'ah. And then he says it's sunnah here and in each rak'ah that is not followed by the tashahhud to briefly rest in iftirash style of sitting before rising. All right. Now remember, we're talking about the first rak'ah. We're talking about the first rak'ah. He says that it's all throughout the Salah. He says in each rak'ah that is not followed by the tashahhud. So we're not talking about the third rak'ah or between the second and third rak'ah. All right. He said any time that is in the Salah that is not followed by the tashahhud, the first tashahhud, meaning that it's not going into the third rak'ah. He says when you sit down, you make your sajda. Like in the first rak'ah, you make your sajda and you sit in the sitting position. Then you make your sajda again. Then he says when you come back up to sit up so that you can stand up, he said you sit again in iftirash. And iftirash is what we saw at the top of the page, the one I told you to circle up at the top of the page. And this is where you sit on your left foot and your right foot goes up. He says they sit there for a brief second. He says to briefly rest in iftirash style before you stand back up. So that's the end of the first rak'ah and the end of the third rak'ah in general. He says then one rises, supported by both hands, palms down and prolonging the takbir till standing. So now he's talking about coming up out of the sajda, where he's still talking about coming up out of the sajda. He says, it's sort of here in each rak'ah. Okay, he says, then one rises. So now he's telling you in the first and the third rak'ah, you're going to come back up into the sitting position. And then once you come, the way in which you come out of that sitting position, he says, is one rises, meaning stands all the way back up. He says, supported by both hands, palms down. So you're going to push up with your hands. Now, remember, you're not down in sajda anymore. You're in your sitting position. You did the sajda, then you came back up and did the sitting position, then you go back down into the sajda. Now you're ready to get up. So you get up and you sit in this iftirah style. You sit in this iftirah style. He says, and then when you're coming out of the iftirah style, you put your hands on the ground and you push up. Right? And he says that you prolong the takbir. It's from the sunnah that you prolong the takbir until you're standing all the way up. So you're coming up from the sitting position, or you're coming up from the sajda. There is no tashahud. So we just sit there for a second, and then we use our hands, we push up, Allahu Akbar, to the point where we're standing back up again. And he says that this is called Jalsat al-Istiraha, and you should underline that as well. This sitting position that we're talking about, between when you're coming out of the ruku, the sajda, and between you're standing back up, this particular one is called Jalsat al-Istiraha. All right. This is, he says, and this is not the one that's done after sajda tilawa. Okay, the Jalsat al-Istiraha is a sitting position that you rest in. This is what it means. Istiraha means to rest. So it's like a resting position. After the first set of sajdas and after the third set of sajdas. This is where this jalsa comes in, or this sitting position for istiraha or relaxation. He says it is not done after sajda tilawa. Sajda tilawa is the sajda that you do. You know how when someone's reciting the Quran in the Salah, they go to recite the Quran and they'll get to a point and then they'll go down in the sajda. Or really, we should be in the point as we're reading the Quran. There are certain points, and when we get to it, we go down. We make a sajda. Tayyib. Now, with this being said, he said it's not done after sajda to tilawa. So, when you go down to sajda to tilawa, you make your sajda, right? And you get straight back up. You don't sit in that jalsa til istiraha, or that sitting position. You don't sit back in that position. You get right up, inshallah. And that's the end of that part. And inshallah ta'ala, we'll start next week. We'll go into uh what he says here about the second rak'ah. Right? Anybody got any questions? Some do it with their fist. Yes, some people can do it with their fist. And it's not to say it's not acceptable, but he's telling us the best practices. Here he's telling us best practices. You even see some people doing it with their fingertips. So put their fingertips down and push themselves up.